get them for other things. Also, that blue light, just is in terms of like if you work behind the computer screen a lot, is also not a real good thing for you anyway, because your eyes are constantly getting bombarded with all that blue light, and it can cause eye issues like down the road. And we don't know, because a lot of the technology stuff we have, how it's going to affect our bodies in 50 years. Because, I mean, just look at the difference in an iPad now than what it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, it's a totally different deal when you got, especially when you got, like, look at the TVs we have now. You know, I mean, it seems like they get bigger and bigger every single year. You get, we have a 55-inch TV in the living room, and that's not even a big TV anymore, right? And you know, and you look at how close you are to those TVs too that are like that. And that's going to be a problem for you, getting bombarded with all that. I mean, and especially when they're like super high definition.
So I was wondering if you got an older one that's not 4K or whatever.
I don't know. It's like 3 years old. It's probably better because those ones, as they get more and more, I don't know, it just seems like they're super bright. And also the distance that you are away from a TV, right? It's like you got it's like a movie. Some of those ones are 65, 70 inches. They're like I think I've been in a movie theater that had a smaller screen than that. And people are sitting, you know, 5, 6 feet away from it. And that can't be good for you. So wearing those kind of glasses really helps. Other things that will help optimize your sleep and help promote that is getting some of your amino acids like thiamine, taurine. Those that come from things like eating organ meats, or you can supplement with some liver tablets or things. We talked about that. I mean, I'm not a big liver eating fan, you know, but I do supplement with some of those things. I'm getting better at it. Liver and those kinds of things are actually really like superfoods. They're really good for a lot of different things. I mean, I will say it flat out. But I'm just not, I don't eat a lot of it. I do take the supplements though, the liver tablets. Get adequate zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, and B vitamins. I take ZMA, I've talked about that before, the other one. Zinc, magnesium, and like B6 and magnesium aspartate. They're like it's like a sleep aid, it's a sports supplement actually. Because all these things have to do with like healthy hormone levels and stuff like that. ZMA, they always talk about being like gaining muscle, and that's what was always sold like bodybuilding stores for like gaining muscle and boosting testosterone and all these things. Well, really what it does is it helps you sleep better and helps you get in your zinc and your magnesium, and you get in some of your B vitamins. It's like, well, duh. If you're deficient in those, then you're not going to be putting on muscle. You're not going to be as strong. So it's like that's a huge thing. So almost every class now is zinc, magnesium, vitamin D. And remember, all this stuff that I'm talking about here also ties right into immunity. I mean, now I've forwarded enough articles, I think. I mean, I always have been for like years about the importance of vitamin D levels. But all this stuff we're hearing about people who with, you know, they're infected with coronavirus, their vitamin D levels are a huge factor in how well that they're doing, they're coming out. Finding people that are deficient are having a much worse outcome than that. So those kinds of things are even more important now than they've ever been. And zinc helps your immunity, right?
Are they talking about D? Does D help with prevention, or is it just around recovery? Like if you get it?
I think it's prevention and recovery. I don't know. Well, I'd have to look at the studies to see, but I know if you're vitamin D deficient coming into it, you're going to be a lot more susceptible to it. Your immune system's not going to be as strong.
You might not even know
period.
you have it, right? If you have enough vitamin D, you might just be
Yeah, asymptomatic.
anybody that lives in this hemisphere, and at this latitude here, is pretty much gonna be vitamin D deficient. You know, I don't know how much. Last year is the first year I've ever done this as experiments because it was just so long and dreary without sunlight. We didn't have our typical inversion we get here, but I actually went to like one of those tanning places I would go about every 10 days and go for a few minutes, and they had one of those like combination red light and tanning thing that I went in there, and I would just go for like 7 or 8, about every 10 days throughout from like January till like March, when I could actually get out and get real sunlight.
Do you notice a difference?
Huh?
Do you notice a
Yes.
difference?
I mean, it was like almost instantly. I'd go in there and just like, I'd come out and just feel like good, you know? So I think it really affects me a lot. So anyway, those are good. Now, taking melatonin is okay if you're trying to do that, but my advice is to use it really sparingly and not get like dependent on it. Now, granted, I am really sensitive to it, so I don't know how everybody is on that. I'll literally I'll take like a small one, like a 1 milligram one, and I will take it, and if I don't make sure I take it like 10 hours before I actually have to do something, I feel like this.
Yeah.
Other people, they come in, and that's the smallest dose you can possibly get. That's like a baby dose or whatever. And if I take a 3 mil, I haven't taken a 3 milligram one forever. That's the highest one I've ever taken because it usually came in 3 milligrams. And I was like useless. I mean, I was like, you better check make sure you're breathing still. So I ended up cutting those in half, and that was actually too much. So I take like one. They come in like 5 or 10 milligram things on there. And I don't know, but I do know this. I do know it's extremely safe, and it doesn't have there's no propensity to like abuse it, right? And there's never been a case of anybody ODing on it that I know of. I could be wrong. Might look it up, and maybe there is somebody now. But as of a few years ago, there was nobody that ever seen any issue. But it's still it's a naturally occurring hormone. And if you're taking it, I think there's always got to be no matter what. If it works, there's always going to be a reaction, right? I mean, one of the things that I always like to joke about supplements and vitamins and sports supplements or anything is that if you want to know if it works, turn it around and look at it. If it's got a bunch of side effects, potential side effects, it probably does something. It probably works. If it doesn't have, when they say there's no side effects and no nothing, I'm kind of, maybe that doesn't work. Because anything we put in our body that does something, there's going to be a reaction on the other end somewhere, right? Now, avoid excess alcohol and caffeine. I try to limit my caffeine intake, and I'm a high caffeine person, but after about 4 or 5 in the evening, about 4 o'clock is usually when I'm trying to cut that off.
Yeah, if I have it like after 3, sometimes I can't fall asleep that.
Yeah, and you just know where you're sitting on that.
In the morning, that's about it. Yeah.
I have found this and I think a lot of people have also found this. I don't have a problem taking some if I'm going to do a late work, because like sometimes I'll have workouts at like 8 o'clock at night. And if I take that at night and I work out really hard, I don't have a problem. It's like I metabolize it faster. And I don't have a problem. But if I'm not going to do a heavy workout, I make sure that at that time, like within an hour of taking it, I try not to take anything like past like 4 o'clock. Now, alcohol, obviously that can mess with you too, because that can cause your sleep patterns to be all kinds of screwed up. Especially if it's sugary, because you'll notice different things. If you have too much alcohol, or maybe not what you might even consider too much, but I like red wine. red wine will kind of mess with me now. Like, I've noticed in the last couple of years, that if I have it, a couple of glasses of red wine, that I'll wake up at like 2:30 in the morning for a while, all the time. I think there's something that does that. It converts to a sugar and then it turns into a stimulus. I think it also messes with your blood sugar, and if, for the same reason, if you eat a big, heavy carb meal sometimes right at night before bed, your blood sugar will, as you take it in, your blood sugar sometimes will rise for a while afterwards, and then when it drops down as a rebound off that other comes down and your cortisol levels pump up. That's when you can have that, it's like all of a sudden you got cortisol production because your blood sugar is a little bit lower and you wake up, and that can wake you up. It can also mess with your melatonin and your growth hormone release too. So, you know, watch the alcohol, especially, you know, all this stuff that comes to do with mood and immune system as well. Vitamin C, I like taking vitamin C at night and after training, and now I've been taking like a powdered stuff. I've been putting it in water, and I've been getting a bunch more. There's a lady, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, really smart, she did a thing on coronavirus stuff, and she was talking about vitamin D and vitamin C, and she's drinking that all the time. And now we're finding all those things, zinc, vitamin C, all that, those are huge things to do with just the general immune system when we're in cold season. Just cold and flu season, you know, just start doing it. It's all those viruses are gonna be looking at you. Now, another thing about vitamin C and all the sugary treats and things that we get bombarded with around holiday times is that high amounts of sugar will also kind of exclude the vitamin C from your cells, so you don't get the benefit of the vitamin C if you have high blood sugar. It's like it cancels it out. So, like with somebody, you got a cold and they give you a big old thing of orange juice, all that sugar can tend to like cancel that vitamin C out, you know. Then your other kind of general things, you know, foam roller stretch before bed, practice some deep breathing. I like Epsom salt baths. It's like one of my favorite things, especially for sore muscles and stuff. Do you ever do those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are like awesome.
Yeah, I love that. They have scented Epsom salt too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like a eucalyptus one,
Yeah.
or some other ones.
Mm-hmm.
I like those things a lot. Now, naps are your friend. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking naps. Helps all the neurotransmitters in your brain reset themselves. Makes your brain sharper. You ever notice how you like take a 20-minute nap and all of a sudden you're like all recharged? Nothing wrong with naps. Okay, if you have the ability to take them, take them. And if you want to, do it. There's nothing unhealthy about it. I mean, if you're working a job, your boss might not see it that way, but in my opinion, a lot of big companies now are making places for people where they can go and take a nap during the day. They have a nap break. And so have you seen that? And some of those big companies, they'll actually have that and encourage that because it makes their people more productive and sharper.
You know, some night shift.
Yeah. Well, I could think of bosses I had at night that said, hey, listen, if you can't stay awake, just,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, yeah.
But there was also the night, you know, along that same line, I was just thinking, I've used this example before about the blue light example. Have you ever seen the night shift thing of shining the flashlight in your eye for a second to wake yourself up if you're like really sleepy?
I haven't done that one, no.
Yeah, it works. It
You
worked.
have to punch yourself in the leg because you're starting to get the nods while you're trying, slapping yourself.
Yeah, open a car door,
Yeah.
open a window. But no, that would actually, that was actually the thing, right? You shine a flashlight in your face and it would work, keep you awake. So, obviously, we need more sleep in the winter time. It's a fact of life, and we don't get it because of our lifestyles these days. We just don't. Shift work can cause special problems already. Safeguard your sleep like your life depends on it. Make it important. When I say biphasic sleep is normal and natural, it means if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're all alert, do something, try to find something to do, rather than just sit there in bed and think about how the sleep you're missing out on. If you have an appointment or you gotta get up or do something, you sit there and it's like, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I gotta get up in 4 hours. And you sit there and you toss and turn, and pretty soon 90 minutes gone by, 2 hours have gone by. Oh shit, I gotta get up in 2 hours, 90 minutes, and you're like, stress yourself out. Find something to do. Okay, I gotta buzz through these things. I'll keep you guys all night. Avoid acute and chronic stressors. Okay, we can't control all the things that stress us out in life, right? There's some we can. It's like that old saying, give me the strength to handle what I can't change. Give me the strength to change what I can, and then to basically ignore how.
Wisdom to know the difference, right?
Yeah, know the difference and be able to say, hey, listen, you know what? I handle what I can't change and do what I can. The effect the stressor has on you has to do with how much awareness and control you have over the situation. Awareness is pretty key as well to that. They've done studies with different like lab rats where they could kill them through exercise if they forced them to do it or forced them to get up and do things at different times when they had zero control over it. But if the mice had control, like they were going to get something for it, they could handle it. They've also done studies. One of the ones that's popular to see is they've done things where they've done studies on baboons and different primates, where they'll take a pack of them, or whatever they call it, pack of baboons. They call it a pack or a club or a pride or like lions or whatever they call them, and they'll dart them, and without a way that they knew that they were going to get darted, and they would put them to sleep, and that would measure the cortisol levels and testosterone levels of all these different ones and hormone levels of different ones in the pack. And what they always found was that the alpha males in there had more testosterone and less cortisol than the ones that were down farther in the pecking order. And the thing is, they had more control over their situation and what was going on. That was one of the correlations. They've also found that with air traffic controllers. And air traffic controllers are in there, and of course that's a really stressful job, right? But the supervisors of the shifts on the air traffic control things had lower cortisol levels than the ones that were subordinates in there. And it's because they had more control over the situation. They could make more decisions and have more decision-making ability in it than the ones that were subordinate to them. Rather than having just to be told what to do, they had more decision-making ability, so that helps. So the more control you have over things, that we can't control everything, but we have control over a lot of things. But we can control how we respond to things, or maybe we can shut off the floodgates to some of the stressors that we have as well. Stress eating and comfort foods. These are natural responses to heightened cortisol and heightened stress levels. Stress eating is a real thing, okay? It's not just a weakness, and you're not just like the Snickers commercial, the hangry thing, that's for real, right? It's a real thing, and food manufacturers today take advantage of that for people. So we know that. So be aware that no, that if you're under a bunch of stress and somebody puts this, you're gonna be more susceptible to that. So maybe plan to have things around you that maybe you don't have all the sugary things that are available to you that are not gonna have that as well. And sometimes it's not sugar you're craving necessarily, but you're craving salt. So sometimes you get salty. Something that's salty, not like a bag of chips salty, but like, you know, jerky, or even just, I supplement with salt sometimes. Like literally we'll take a, like a little 1/8 teaspoon thing of Redmond real salt, just throw it in my mouth, suck down, or salt. And it does, because we can be salt deficient. I could do a whole class on salt problems. Now, the reason I put these other things on holiday thing is because this is all gonna be a lot worse this time of year, and this year particularly, as we look at financial stress. Okay, get into this in the holiday season. People get, just frankly, people get stupid sometimes in holiday seasons, right? They buy a lot of crap for people that people don't really need. And then you get the whole deal of, well, they, you know, so-and-so got me something really nice, so I gotta get them something. There's pressure to buy all these things. Those people don't need too much stuff. You know, I don't need anything. Stacy and I, when we put like limits, I mean, very small limits on what we can spend on each other. We're like, we're not gonna be subject to that, you know, that aspect of that. You know, so that's something that's important. Now, family stress. This year it's almost in a weirder way because maybe you want to spend time with family, and maybe it's not a good idea to spend a bunch of time with a bunch of family members. Sometimes, usually I bring that up in the opposite direction, because sometimes I always joke about this, but like, you know, you got, like, I kind of have a sort of big extended family, and everybody has Christmas functions, stuff like that, and sometimes you don't want to go to them if nobody's watching. My family. I'll keep that secret for a reason.
Yeah, leave that part out, right? Yeah.
But seriously, you know what? Sometimes you don't want to go to those things, and I know people, and not everybody has the most happy functioning family in the world, right? I mean, hell, we got all kinds of these other things going on. We got an election year going on, which that causes family stress too, right? I mean, that can be, it shouldn't, but it does. And you know it will. It's gotten worse and worse and worse over the last several years. But you know, that could be a deal, and sometimes be selfish and just say, hey, you know, hey, we can't make it. Now you kind of got a ready excuse in a way for a lot of people. You feel like, you know, but it maybe that stresses you in a different way, and I don't know how to combat that on that end. But you know, there's a lot of families that are still having those get-togethers, and you try to find a way around it, or you just dread that party. And sometimes it's not just family stress either, which leads to the next point here on social pressure. You know, be selfish. Social pressure to attend this party or that party, or go to this party or whatever, and like your work has a party. You don't really want to go, right? Sometimes you don't necessarily want to go to your work company party and deal with somebody on your off time when you're not being paid to do it, and you might say something that is going to come back to haunt you at work later. And so that can be a stressor for people, right? To have that kind of social pressure. Don't be afraid to be selfish. And sometimes really ask yourself what will make you the happiest. Just take a break. Just take a second and go, before you make a decision or commit to some of those things, is what's going to make me the happiest? You know, what's going to be a big drain on that? I have some people that, you know, that are sometimes you're around, that you like these people, and we all have these people in our lives that we really like these people, we care about these people, but sometimes they can have like a stressful life situation, and you feel like when you're around them, sometimes that you just feel like exhausted after you leave, because they've got a whole bunch of things that kind of, they like dump on you, and sometimes it's like, you know, it's okay to say no. You know, if you got stuff going on. Now, social media news, holy cow. I have a thing I call it's the 25-year rule now. It used to be the 20-year rule, but I would just sit there and put yourself in a time machine. And now we can do it, right? Say it's 1995, we're all old enough to know what 1995 was like in here. Okay? Dang, I'm gonna have to turn that soon. It's gonna be a 3rd-year rule before I know it. But think about it, 1995, okay? We didn't, you think about for one thing, think about the news cycle in 1995. You had the local paper, you had to go buy the paper to get it, or have it delivered to your house. You had the news on, unless you were watching CNN, you didn't have 24 hours of news, right? You had a half hour at like 5:30, and then you had an hour at 10, or half hour at 10 o'clock. And that's all you had. And it was like, if you watched the national news, you'd have a half hour, but unless you were watching like 2020 or all those things, or you know, you're finding some other news show on someplace. But you'd have a half hour local news and maybe half hour national news, and that was it. And usually the local news was stuff that was like, yeah, it's probably gonna affect me. You know what I mean? Okay, the city council just voted to do this, or the weather's gonna be like this, or whatever. That's stuff that affected you immediately. Now, we don't have a 24-hour news, or we don't have a half-hour news a couple times a day. We have news all day long, every day. You can't do anything. I mean, I dread going into my business email for my website and stuff, because it's on Yahoo, because as soon as I hit that web page, there's 20 damn news headlines from all over the world or the country about a whole bunch of things that will probably never affect me in a million years. Like if you looked at a newspaper and it's like they feed on each other, right? If one of the, like for example, here's a subject that always fires me up, is like any kind of animal cruelty thing, right? You see about somebody that's done something to a dog somewhere, and it makes national news. Well now, because that does, and people will click on it and they'll read it and they'll do this and they'll do that, all of a sudden you'll see that, and if you click on it and you look at it, all of a sudden you're gonna get a whole bunch more stories about animal cruelty from all over. Like there'll be a story and yeah, it happens, we know bad things happen, and we can't stick our head totally in the sand. But I don't necessarily need to know about every animal cruelty thing that happens in the country. I don't need to be bombarded with that every single time that I go to check an email, you know, or something. And you said it's really hard to get away from it. Every time you pick up your phone, you got it. Now you got TV channels. Like if you got cable, you got news channels. I don't know how many news channels there are anymore, but there seems like there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And you could sit there and you could just fester for like 24 hours a day on that stuff, right? And YouTube, even YouTube, the stuff that's on, they have like news channels that'll pop up there too. So you can it's like you can't get away from it. Find a way to do it. I try to follow that rule, but it's almost impossible. And it's really unfortunate when we get to that situation. And that goes into social media as well. That's just an absolute nightmare. It really is. Because we have a toxic environment, people that will never affect us. And we have this ability now to, before you were probably Facebook friends or Instagram or whatever, Twitter or all that stuff out there, you had the ability to distance yourself from people that in your life for whatever reason weren't around you. You know, there's sometimes you maintain contact with friends or good friends like this, but there's also those people like somebody you went to high school with that you have nothing in common with, you never will be around again, that you don't necessarily want to be around. You know what I mean? You wouldn't go hang around with them, and then people will be arguing with that person, or worse, with a stranger that they don't know. Now, because of, you know, me in the kettlebell world and stuff like that, I've got hundreds of people on there, and your job, probably the same thing, you've got hundreds of people you have to interact with. And that's not necessarily really helpful, because what's happened to us as a society, and this is a bigger issue than we can cover in this at all, but is that we have the ability to have very superficial relationships with people that we wouldn't necessarily consider friends and talk to, you know, like, I mean, I've known you for a long time, but we're friends, right? I mean, we can come in here and we can talk, and it's like, you know, it's I know you on a face-to-face basis, you know, even if you know, you go a long time, you're still friends with that person, you can still talk to that person on that level. But there's other people that we know very superficially that can stress people out, because they start talking about stuff, or they start arguing about things. And even worse when it's strangers. You look up on some damn news story and people get sucked into that, and that's bad. We've all done it, so I'm not saying I've done it. In the nutrition world, or in some issues we feel passionate about, and that can do it. But I've read things where people literally, holy cow, like, you'll post some article, something, and two people that I know don't know each other at all will have had a lengthy, like, debate at 3 o'clock in the morning. There used to be this one guy that I would put something up, and I would wake up in the morning, and it would be like a 2,000 word rant that I got at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, holy cow, dude. And there's a friend of mine, some of the friends that I got rid of on the social media stuff, there was a friend of mine, good friend of mine for a long time, and he would get in on these political things, and I block him out. I just snooze and block out all these things, unfollow, still be friends with these people, but just not see them. And I'm not kidding. One day I was talking to Stacey, I said, you know, there's something wrong with him. So let's just look at this. And it was on it was like these political posts, and it literally, we totaled it up, and it was like 33 of them in the last 24 hours. And they all had a lengthy, probably 200 to 500 word commentary on top of all these little articles or a video on these things. So like literally every hour, more than every hour of the day. Now I know he types like 100 words a minute, so, or 120 words a minute, so he can like do this really fast, and he's a sharp guy, he's a fast talker. But I'm like going, dude, if you're letting something like that get in your head, that is not healthy. That's crazy talk right there, you know, so, sorry. Anyway, follow that rule. I think that's really valuable this time of year, especially with all this virus stuff. Because people are just stressed, right? And I don't know what to think about those numbers. Do you? I don't. They change all the time, and I don't know how dangerous things are. It's just, geez. So the action items I have on here: remove corn, wheat, and soy. I've always talked about that every class. Evaluate sleep hygiene. These are things you can do today. Identify some behaviors or trigger things that might trigger poor eating choices. That's going to be different for everybody. Control what you can, manage what you can't. And try not to let yourself become a victim of circumstance. We all have control over what we put in our mouth, okay? Maybe not have control over everything else, but we have control over that. That's 100% within our control. Sometimes focus on what makes you the happiest. And I think if you really go down the list of things, it's not gonna be eating things, it's not gonna be buying things. I think we're really going to that. Eliminate people, news, new social media sources that don't have a direct and positive effect on your life. If it's something, unless you really want to dive deep into a topic or whatever, something's important to you, try to eliminate as many of those things you can as damn near impossible. Look at ancestral food options for holiday feasts. There's gonna be an article I share every year with everybody on first Thanksgiving. It's according to like a Smithsonian article on what was probably on the table, and it wasn't a bunch of pies and whatever, all the junk, and sweetened, oversweet cranberry sauce and all that stuff. But it sounds pretty good to me. I mean, it was like yummy, yummy, yummy stuff, and you'll like it. It's like lots of, well, you might if you had a shot more deer this year.
Do you eat sugar?
Huh?
Do you eat sugar? We were talking about this. I
I
said something
don't.
about stevia earlier, and I was joking, and
I try
Gabe
to
said
avoid
that
it.
you don't like. I said, does he eat like unsweetened pies, or what do you do for
Well, I don't have a sweet
cooking
tooth.
stuff?
I don't have much of a sweet tooth, so I don't. I'm a salty person. I mean, I'll have some of it. If I'm gonna have it, I'm gonna have real sugar though, if that's what you're asking. I mean, I don't like artificial sweeteners too much. I'll have it like in a sports drink or something like that now and then, but I would rather have the real sugar if I'm gonna have it. I don't like high fructose corn syrup. If it comes from nature, it's probably okay. If it's made in a lab, it's not. And high fructose corn syrup is made in a lab. It's not natural. Take time to enjoy the moment. Be grateful. We have a lot of blessings here that we take for granted, and we think about that we live in the best country in the world, and probably the best area of that whole country. We're safe, relatively free of environmental catastrophe. We got a pandemic going on, but we're a lot better able to equip it to handle this than anybody else in the world, as far as I'm concerned. We have enough to eat, and we have the potential to be the healthiest that we could ever be in our lives, right now. And when I say that we are in the best country in the world and the best area of that country, it's like, we look at it and people go, well, they get fired up over an election year, or they get fired, everyone does, or people do, and they get all this stuff and they're like this, and I'm like, look, listen guys, you know what? We have clean water to drink, right? We're not gonna freeze to death. We're living in a place, we're not worried about a tornado or a flood. We're not worried about a big huge forest fire burning up. I'm talking about this valley. We aren't worried about someone setting up roadside bombs on Eagle Road and blowing us up. And we're not worried about, missile strikes coming and raining down on us, like if we lived in some other countries in the world. So, we're pretty damn lucky. Sometimes I like the idea of donating to a cause that you believe in or something, and I think there's special karma in that, is when you don't tell anyone about it, and you don't tell them, you keep it a secret. If you're gonna do something, donate something, and keep it a secret. When people they brag about how much they donate to things. It's a social media thing that what people do. And also remember this, it's at the very end, I like to put this, that no matter what else, you can change your health in some way, starting with your next meal, your next night of sleep, and your next training session, and think of progress, not perfection. So, anyway, and I didn't pause for any questions tonight. I'm sorry if I went a little fast, but I was trying to cram that in there. Does anybody have any questions or anything? You asked about the sugar, but I don't have a real super sweet tooth, but if I'm gonna have sugar, it's gonna be the real thing.
I was just curious, like if your wife